She had learned long ago how to move quietly through the world. Not because she wanted to, but because life had trained her that way. She worked in a place where people rarely looked twice at her. She smiled, did her job, listened more than she spoke, and went home at the end of each day without leaving a mark on anyone's memory. Most people only knew her as someone who was always there, blending into the background like furniture that had always existed. Music was the one place where she felt visible, even if no one was watching. At home, in a small rented room with thin walls and an old floor that creaked with every step, there was a piano pushed against the wall. It was not new. Some keys were worn, and a few made softer sounds than the rest. But to her, it was the most honest thing in her life. When she played, the noise of the world faded. No judgments, no expectations. Just sound, breath, and feeling. She had not always lived this way. Years ago, music had been a dream she spoke about out loud. She believed talent would naturally open doors. But life had other plans. Bills came first. Responsibilities followed. Dreams were slowly pushed into smaller spaces until they fit into late nights and quiet mornings. She never stopped playing, but she stopped hoping anyone would hear her. On one ordinary evening, the routine broke. The place was crowded that night. Expensive clothes, confident laughter, and people who spoke as if the world always answered them. She moved between tables with practiced ease, carrying trays, avoiding eye contact unless necessary. That was when she noticed him. He stood out without trying. Not loud, not flashy, just calm in a way that came from knowing money could solve most problems. People leaned toward him when he spoke. Others laughed a little too quickly at his jokes. He was a known millionaire, someone who had built his success through sharp decisions and a strong belief in his own judgment. He had a habit of speaking his thoughts plainly, even when they sounded harsh. To him, honesty mattered more than feelings. At some point in the evening, a conversation drifted toward music. Someone mentioned talent, raw ability, and how rare true skill really was. The millionaire smiled slightly and said that most people believed they were special, but very few actually were. According to him, talent without proof was just a story people told themselves. She heard the words while standing nearby, refilling glasses. She did not mean to listen, but they landed heavier than expected. Someone casually pointed toward the piano in the corner of the room, more as decoration than anything else. The millionaire glanced at it and laughed softly. He said that if talent were real, anyone could walk up and prove it. But that almost never happened. Without planning to, she spoke. Her voice came out quiet but clear. She said that sometimes people had talent but no place to show it. The table fell silent for a second. Heads turned. The millionaire looked at her for the first time, really looked, as if noticing her existence surprised him. He raised an eyebrow, not unkindly, but with doubt written plainly across his face. He asked if she played. She hesitated. Every instinct told her to step back, to smile politely and disappear. That had always been safer. But something inside her was tired of being invisible. She nodded and said yes, she did. A few people smiled politely. Others exchanged looks. The millionaire leaned back slightly and studied her. He did not see a performer. He saw someone ordinary, someone who did not match his idea of excellence. He asked almost casually if she believed she was good. She answered honestly. She said she believed she was prepared. That was when the challenge appeared, not loudly, not cruelly, but clearly. He said that belief was easy. Proof was harder. If she truly thought she had something special, she could play one classical piece. Just one. If it impressed him, he would admit he was wrong. If it didn't, then it would simply confirm what he already believed. The room shifted. This was no longer a casual comment. It felt like a test laid bare in front of strangers. She could feel eyes on her, curiosity mixed with quiet judgment. Some people already expected failure. Others were simply entertained. Her heart beat faster. This was not how she imagined being heard. Not like this. Not under a spotlight shaped by doubt. But walking away would feel worse. It would mean agreeing with him without saying a word. She agreed. The piano suddenly felt much farther away than it actually was. Each step toward it carried the weight of years of silence. She sat down slowly, placing her hands on the keys. For a moment, she did nothing. The room waited. She took a breath and reminded herself that she was not playing for them. She was playing because this was the one place she belonged. She chose a classical piece she had played countless times alone. Not because it was flashy, but because it was honest. It carried sadness, strength, and hope all at once. It reminded her why she had never quit, even when no one listened. Before she began, she closed her eyes for a brief second. In that moment, the room disappeared. The millionaire, the crowd, the challenge, all faded into silence. There was only the piano and her hands. The first notes were soft. Some people barely noticed at first. But slowly, the sound settled into the space. Conversations stopped. The music grew, not louder, but deeper. Every note carried intention. There was no rush, no need to impress. Just truth. As she played, her posture changed. The quiet worker everyone ignored was gone. In her place sat someone steady, focused, and alive. The piece unfolded naturally, like a story told without words. It spoke of struggle, patience, and quiet strength. The millionaire watched closely now. His expression shifted, not suddenly, but gradually. The confidence he carried did not disappear, but something else joined it. Curiosity, then surprise. He had expected a mistake, a stumble, something that would confirm his belief. Instead, he heard control, emotion, and understanding. The room felt different by the time the final notes faded. No one clapped right away. Not because they were unimpressed, but because the silence felt important. It was the kind of silence that follows something real. She lifted her hands from the keys and opened her eyes. Her heart was still racing, but there was calm underneath it. She had done what she came to do. Whether it was enough was no longer in her control. She stood up quietly, ready to return to her place, unsure of what would happen next. She did not look at the millionaire. She did not wait for approval. In that moment, simply having been heard felt like something she could carry with her, no matter the outcome. What she did not yet know was that the challenge meant to prove her wrong had already begun to change everything. After that night, the world around her felt heavier and lighter at the same time. She returned home carrying the memory of every eye that had turned toward her and every note that had filled the room. It was strange to feel seen and invisible at the same time. She thought about the millionaire's words, about the doubt he had placed in front of her like a wall. At first, she had wanted nothing more than to forget the entire encounter, to go back to the quiet routine that had kept her safe for so many years. But that night, as she lay in bed with the moonlight falling softly across the floor, she realized she could not unhear the sound of her own music filling that crowded room. She had felt powerful in a way she had almost forgotten existed. The days that followed were not simple. At work, she moved through her usual tasks, but her mind was elsewhere. Every time she lifted a tray or wiped a table, she found herself thinking about what had happened. People occasionally glanced at her differently, some with curiosity, others with a hint of admiration. She noticed these small changes but did not yet understand their meaning. It was the whispers, the subtle looks, and the way someone would hesitate before speaking to her that made her realize her life had shifted, even if just a little. She tried to focus on her music again. She went to her small room, sat at her piano, and tried to play, but the silence felt different. The music she had played for herself alone now carried the weight of expectation. She could feel the memory of the millionaire's gaze every time her fingers pressed the keys. It was not a pressure she had chosen, but it pressed down on her all the same. She wondered if she could ever play without it, if she could ever return to the comfort of making sound for the sake of sound alone. Her practice became more deliberate. Every day she set aside hours, not to prove anything to the people around her, but to prove something to herself. She wanted to feel prepared, as she had said that night. She wanted to know that her music could speak clearly, with honesty and control, without faltering under judgment. First, it was difficult. Her hands trembled sometimes. Her mind wandered. She made mistakes that would have seemed small before, but now they loomed large. She felt frustration creep in, a familiar companion from years of solitude and quiet struggle. But she refused to let it win. She reminded herself that every note, every practice session, brought her closer to the person she had always wanted to be. While she worked, she also began to notice the doubts and expectations in other people's eyes. Friends and neighbors began asking questions, curious about the challenge. Some were supportive, encouraging her to seize the chance. Others were skeptical, warning her that she might be stepping into a world that could crush her if she faltered. Their voices were loud in her mind, competing with her own, but she learned to listen without letting them sway her too much. It was an unfamiliar skill, learning to carry her own truth amid the noise of other people's judgments. She also thought about the millionaire. He had challenged her with confidence, but she realized there had been no cruelty in his words, only a desire to test the limits of what people could do. She wondered if he had expected her to fail, and if so, whether he had ever imagined that she might succeed. The thought made her both nervous and determined. She could not control his expectations, but she could control her preparation. She could not control the crowd's reactions, but she could control the sound she produced. That became her focus. Her preparation was not only technical but emotional. She began to understand that music was not just about hitting the right notes. It was about conveying the feelings behind them. Every mistake she had made in her quiet life, every moment she had felt unseen, became part of the emotion she poured into her playing. She practiced slowly, deliberately, learning to express more than just sound. She learned to feel the story behind each note, to let her fingers speak the words she could not say aloud. This process was exhausting, but it was also freeing. For the first time in a long time, she felt a deep connection to her own life through her music. There were moments when doubt returned. She would sit at the piano and feel the fear creeping in, whispering that she was not good enough, that the challenge had been too large, that she would disappoint everyone, including herself. On those nights, she would take a deep breath and remind herself of the night she had first played in front of the millionaire. She remembered the way the room had gone quiet, the way the music had reached people even when she felt invisible. That memory became her anchor, a reminder that her talent was real and that she could harness it when it mattered. As she prepared, she also began to notice changes in herself beyond music. She walked with a little more confidence, spoke a little more clearly, and held her gaze just a bit longer when meeting someone's eyes. It was not arrogance or pride, just a quiet awareness that she had worth and skill. She realized that this challenge was not only about music but also about reclaiming a sense of self she had lost over the years. Every practice session was a small step toward becoming someone who could face the world without shrinking from it. She thought carefully about which piece to play. It was not an easy decision. There were many pieces she loved, many that she had practiced for years, but she wanted something that truly represented her, something that could carry all the emotion she had bottled up for so long. She settled on a piece that had always been difficult for her, not because it was technically impossible, but because it demanded emotional honesty. She knew that playing it well would require complete focus, complete vulnerability, and complete commitment. It was the right choice, she felt, because it was a mirror of her own life. Complex, sometimes painful, but full of beauty if one listened closely. While she practiced, she also imagined the room full of people again, the millionaire among them. She tried to picture him not as a judge, but as someone who could witness the truth of her skill. It was a mental exercise that both terrified and energized her. She knew she could not control what he felt, but she could control how clearly she spoke through her music. Each day, she played with that image in mind, letting it guide her focus and intensity. Sleep became a precious commodity. She often stayed up late, practicing in the quiet hours when no one could hear her, when the house felt empty and safe. She practiced until her fingers ached, until her mind felt full, until she could no longer keep her eyes open. And then, when she did sleep, her dreams were filled with music. Sometimes they were nightmares, filled with the fear of failure and public humiliation. Other times, they were beautiful, full of light and sound, showing her the power she could hold when she played from her heart. Both were necessary, she realized, shaping her for the moment that was coming. Even as she practiced tirelessly, she tried to maintain her normal life. She worked, she cooked, she walked through the small routines that had carried her through years of quiet living. But the preparation had changed her perspective on everything. Tasks that once felt mundane now felt like opportunities to carry herself with awareness. Each step in her day reminded her that she was moving towards something important, that this challenge was not just a test of talent, but a test of courage, patience, and dedication. She also began to notice small signs of encouragement from the world. A colleague might compliment her skill casually. A neighbor might remark on how calm she looked while carrying a heavy tray. These small acknowledgments did not define her, but they reminded her that her life was not separate from others. Talent existed in context, and while the challenge had begun as a confrontation, she was learning that it was also an invitation to be seen. Throughout all of this, she kept one thought at the center of her mind: the music itself. The challenge, the millionaire, the crowd, all of it was temporary. The music was permanent. It was a voice she had nurtured for years, a companion that had never abandoned her. If she could honor that voice, if she could let it speak freely, then the rest would take care of itself. That belief carried her through the long hours, the doubts, the aches, and the restless nights. As the days turned into weeks, her confidence began to grow. Not the loud, flashy confidence that demands attention, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from knowing one has worked hard and honestly. She began to feel a calm readiness, an inner knowledge that when the moment came, she could face it without fear. The preparation had not only improved her skill but had transformed her understanding of herself. She was no longer just a person who played in the shadows. She was someone who could step forward and be heard. The challenge, which had seemed so daunting at first, became a kind of guiding light. It pushed her to confront her fears, to refine her skill, and to recognize her own strength. She learned that talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and honesty were just as vital. Every day she played, every note she mastered, brought her closer to the moment when she would step into the room and let the world hear her truth. And with each passing day, the fear that had once gripped her heart began to lose its power, replaced by a quiet determination that she had not felt in years. By the time she felt truly ready, she was no longer the same person who had accepted the challenge so hesitantly. She was stronger, more focused, and more aware of the power she carried in her hands. She had faced doubt, pressure, and the expectations of others, and she had emerged with a deeper understanding of her own worth. The music had carried her through, teaching her patience, resilience, and the importance of speaking from the heart. And so, when the day of the performance finally approached, she was ready, not because she had to be, but because she had spent weeks preparing herself in every possible way. She was ready to face the crowd, the millionaire, and the challenge itself, knowing that no matter what happened, she had already changed. The preparation had transformed her from someone who moved quietly through the world into someone who could stand tall and let her music speak for everything she had lived, struggled for, and dreamed about. The night of the performance arrived quietly, almost like it was afraid to announce itself. She walked into the room with a calm she did not entirely feel. Her heart was steady but alive with tension. She could feel the eyes on her the moment she entered. The chatter in the room slowed, the air thickened, and even the millionaire, standing with his usual composed expression, gave her a brief glance that made her stomach tighten. This was it. The moment she had prepared for, dreamed about, and feared for weeks. The piano sat in the corner, polished and gleaming under the soft lights. To anyone else, it might have looked just like another object in a room full of wealth, another decoration meant to fill space. But to her, it was a portal, a bridge to the world she had carried inside herself for so long. Every practice session, every late night, every note she had poured into the air of her small room had been a rehearsal for this exact moment. She approached it carefully, almost reverently, and sat down. The polished wood felt cool beneath her fingertips. A hush spread across the room. Some people whispered under their breath, unsure what to expect. Others leaned forward, curiosity shining in their eyes. They had heard she could play, But what they did not know was how deeply her music could touch them. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and let herself breathe into the sound she was about to make. Her hands moved to the keys. The first note was soft, almost timid, but it carried honesty. She did not try to force grandeur. She simply let the music flow. Each note spoke with clarity. Each pause carried weight. It was not flashy. It did not demand attention with speed or complicated runs. Instead, it invited people to listen, to feel, to remember something they had forgotten about themselves. At first, some guests shifted uncomfortably. They were used to spectacle, to performance meant to impress. But this was different. This was not a show. This was truth. Slowly, the atmosphere began to change. Conversations died down. Eyes focused. Even the millionaire, who had leaned back casually at the start, now watched with a sharp, attentive gaze. Something in the way she played forced him to pay attention, to recognize that this was not a simple test or performance. It was a declaration. The piece she had chosen demanded patience, precision, and emotion. Her fingers moved over the keys with the kind of control that comes from years of practice, but it was more than that. Each note carried her life. The quiet years of work, the lonely nights of practice, the doubts that had whispered in her mind for so long, and the courage she had gathered to face them. It was as if she had poured every feeling she had into sound, and it filled the room with a presence that could not be ignored. People began to notice the subtle changes in the music, the way a single note could shift the air, the way a pause could hang with meaning. She was not only playing for the millionaire anymore. She was playing for herself, for the years she had felt invisible, for the quiet victories she had celebrated alone in her room. And slowly, the audience started to feel it too. The millionaire's expression changed. At first, it was barely noticeable, a slight furrow of the brow. Then, his eyes softened, and he leaned forward, as if trying to understand something he had never considered before. He had challenged her, expecting to find flaws, expecting to confirm his own assumptions about talent and skill. But what he was witnessing now defied expectation. There was no arrogance, no pretense, only raw, undeniable ability. Her playing grew more confident, more expressive. She allowed herself to feel the story of the piece, and in doing so, she allowed the audience to feel it too. It was as if each note were a word in a conversation she had been waiting her whole life to have. The music spoke of struggle, hope, fear, and triumph all at once. It was deeply human, familiar in a way that stirred something inside everyone listening. The room was transformed. People who had come expecting a simple demonstration of skill were now witnessing a performance that touched them on a level they did not anticipate. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, mesmerized by the precision and honesty of each chord. She was no longer just a person playing the piano. She was a voice, a presence, a story unfolding in real time. Even the skeptical onlookers could not deny the power of what they were hearing. It was not about impressing anyone with speed or complexity. It was about connection, about the ability of a single person to reach hearts through dedication and authenticity. She had spent weeks preparing technically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and it showed in every measure. Each note was intentional, each phrase complete and full of meaning. Her body moved naturally with the music, swaying slightly, breathing with the rhythm. She felt fully present, fully alive. The fear that had gnawed at her in the days before was gone, replaced by a focused intensity. She was not performing for approval. She was performing because she had something real to give, and that honesty could not be ignored. The millionaire's posture shifted subtly. His arms uncrossed, his shoulders relaxed, and he tilted his head as if seeing her for the first time. It was a look that carried surprise, respect, and the recognition of a truth he had not expected to encounter. She was not just talented. She was extraordinary. The challenge he had issued, meant to test and perhaps humble her, had revealed something far greater than he could have imagined. Time seemed to stretch. The piece continued, each section building on the one before, carrying tension and release, shadow and light. She felt the story unfolding under her fingers, and she let it happen without interference. There was no need to rush, no need to impress. The music demanded patience, listening, and honesty, and she gave it freely. She noticed the subtle reactions in the room. A hand resting on a table, fingers tapping in time without the person realizing it. A smile appearing quietly on someone's lips, as though the music had reminded them of a memory long forgotten. Heads nodded gently, eyes glimmered with tears, and for the first time in her life, she saw the tangible effect her music could have on others. It was a revelation, not only for the audience but for herself. She realized that all those quiet years of practice, all the times she had doubted her own worth, had led her to this moment. It was not a question of proving anything to the millionaire or to anyone else. It was about showing herself that she could rise, that she could be heard, and that she could make a difference with something so personal and simple as sound. The final notes approached, delicate and lingering. She let them resonate, allowing the echoes to fill the room and settle like dust on familiar surfaces. There was no dramatic flourish, no final gesture meant to draw attention. She simply let the music end, leaving the room in a deep, almost sacred silence. For a moment no one moved. The power of what had just occurred hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Then, slowly, the reactions began. Applause erupted, spontaneous and heartfelt. It was not polite clapping, the kind meant to acknowledge a performance, but deep, sincere appreciation for something they had truly felt. People stood, some wiping their eyes, others leaning toward her to express admiration without words. The atmosphere shifted entirely. She felt a warmth rising in her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy that she had never experienced before. The millionaire remained seated for a moment longer, processing. Then finally he stood. His expression was unreadable at first, but there was a subtle nod, a recognition of skill and honesty. He had issued a challenge expecting confirmation of his own beliefs, but instead, he had encountered truth, talent, and courage. It changed something in him quietly, without words. She rose from the piano, her hands trembling slightly, but her heart steady. She did not speak immediately. There was no need. The room had witnessed her story through music, and their response spoke volumes. She allowed herself a small, private smile. For all the years she had felt invisible, for all the nights she had practiced alone, she had finally been heard in the way she had always wanted. The room buzzed with conversation now, people praising her skill, asking questions, expressing awe. She responded politely, with calm humility, letting the music speak louder than words. The millionaire approached at last, extending a hand, not in condescension but in genuine acknowledgement. She shook it, and in that moment, the challenge that had seemed so daunting became a turning point, a bridge between the past of quiet struggle and a future full of possibility. As she left the room later that evening, the sound of the piano still echoing in her mind, she realized that this night would never be ordinary. She had faced judgment, expectation, and doubt, and she had emerged not only unbroken but elevated. Her music had carried her through, had spoken the words she could not, and had opened doors she had never imagined possible. She understood something profound in that quiet moment as she walked into the cool night air. Talent alone is not enough. Courage, persistence, and honesty are what make it visible. Every note she had played had been a testament to that truth. She had faced the world and shown herself and others what she was capable of. The performance was over, but its impact had only just begun. The millionaire, the audience, and even she herself had been changed by the simple act of listening, feeling, and responding to something real. That one classical piece, played with all her heart, had done more than prove skill. It had transformed perception, challenged assumptions, and left a mark that no applause alone could measure. And in the quiet moments that followed, as she finally exhaled, she knew that this was only the beginning. The challenge had been met. The music had spoken. And everything beyond this night held the possibility of something new, something extraordinary. The night of the performance left her restless, even after the applause had faded. She returned to her small room, carrying the echo of the piano in her mind and the faces of the people who had listened. The experience had been unlike anything she had imagined. The music had spoken in ways words never could, and yet the reality of what it might mean for her life had not fully settled in. She sat by the window, looking out at the quiet streets, and felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her hands still tingled from the touch of the keys, and her heart felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. In the days that followed, the reactions to her performance rippled outward in unexpected ways. People she had only known casually at work now approached her with curiosity, admiration, and respect. Some complimented her skill directly, others expressed surprise at the depth she had revealed. She tried to respond with quiet grace, but inside, a storm of emotions swirled. Pride, relief, fear, and disbelief all competed for attention. She had done something extraordinary, yet she still felt herself grappling with the ordinary realities of life. The millionaire, who had challenged her in the first place, became a presence she could no longer ignore. He began to speak to her in ways that were different from before. Gone was the casual doubt, replaced by a mixture of curiosity and respect. He asked questions not about the performance itself, but about her preparation, her inspiration, and her experience. She noticed subtle changes in his tone, the careful way he listened, and the way his eyes no longer carried the same certainty he had once held. The challenge he had issued was no longer a test. It had become a recognition of something he had underestimated. Despite the attention, she tried to maintain her routines. Work remained demanding, and she continued her quiet evenings at home, practicing music and reflecting on what had happened. But even in these ordinary moments, life felt subtly different. She carried herself with a newfound confidence, a sense of self-worth that had grown from facing fear and doubt and emerging intact. The music had not only proven her talent to others, it had proven it to herself. And that realization gave her a sense of freedom she had never known. Opportunities began to appear slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Invitations to play at small gatherings, requests to perform privately for acquaintances of the millionaire, and even offers to collaborate with other musicians started to arrive. Each opportunity came with its own uncertainty, and she approached them cautiously, aware that success was not guaranteed. Yet the idea that her music could open doors was both thrilling and terrifying. She felt as if she were stepping into a world she had observed from the shadows her entire life but had never dared enter. Her relationship with the millionaire deepened, though it remained complex. He had not always been easy to understand, and his wealth and influence made him seem distant. Yet there was a vulnerability in his admiration for her that she had not expected. He seemed to recognize that talent and effort could not always be measured by conventional standards, and he began to treat her not as someone to challenge, but as someone to respect. Conversations between them were cautious at first, focused on music, technique, and inspiration. Gradually, they became more personal, touching on life, ambition, and the quiet struggles each had faced. She learned that even someone with so much power could carry doubt and insecurity, and that recognition sometimes came only when humility replaced expectation. The ripple effect of her performance extended beyond individual interactions. The room where she had played became a point of conversation in social circles, not as a tale of spectacle, but as a story of sincerity and talent. People spoke of the way her music moved them, of the unexpected depth in her playing, and of the courage it took to perform under pressure. She began to understand that her life, once confined to quiet routines, was now intersecting with the wider world in ways she had never imagined. The recognition was not about fame or wealth, it was about being seen for who she truly was. Even as her life began to change, she faced challenges she had not anticipated. Some people doubted her, questioning whether her performance had been an anomaly or a true reflection of her skill. There were moments when she felt the weight of expectation pressing down, moments when fear crept back into her thoughts. Could she ever perform at the same level again? Would she be able to maintain the honesty and depth that had moved so many people? These questions haunted her, yet they also drove her to continue practicing, to refine her technique, and to deepen her understanding of the music she loved. Through it all, She remained deeply aware of the role music had played in transforming her life. The piano was no longer simply an instrument. It was a lifeline, a medium through which she could express everything she had experienced. The challenge had pushed her beyond her comfort zone, but it had also revealed the strength she possessed all along. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Each performance, each practice session, became a reaffirmation of that truth. The millionaire, too, underwent a quiet transformation. He had approached the challenge with confidence, expecting to witness failure, but instead he encountered authenticity and excellence. His perception of talent, effort, and recognition shifted. He began to value patience, dedication, and sincerity in ways he had not before. In her presence, he saw the limits of assumptions and the power of humility. Their interactions became less about judgment and more about genuine engagement, a meeting of two people who had been challenged to see the world differently. As she navigated the changing dynamics of her life, she also found herself thinking about the future in ways she had never dared. For so long, she had lived in the moment, surviving day by day, practicing quietly, and keeping her dreams contained. Now, she began to consider possibilities beyond the familiar. Could she share her music more widely? Could she teach, perform, or collaborate? The thought was both exhilarating and frightening, but the sense of potential was undeniable. She had proven to herself that she could rise to a challenge, and that realization became the foundation for exploring new horizons. She also learned to balance attention with privacy. The recognition she received was new and, at times, overwhelming. She valued the quiet moments at home, the solitude that had always allowed her to connect with music. She began to structure her days to include both preparation and reflection, performance and rest. The balance was delicate but essential, allowing her to remain grounded even as her life expanded in unexpected directions. Through it all, her connection to the piano remained central. Each time she played, she remembered the night of the challenge, the silence that followed her first performance, and the way music had carried her through fear, doubt, and uncertainty. She understood that the piano was more than an instrument. It was a companion, a witness, and a bridge to both herself and the world around her. The lessons she had learned in preparation, in facing judgment, and in performing with honesty became part of the music itself. Her confidence grew not from applause or recognition, but from the knowledge that she had done what few could. She had trusted herself, confronted a powerful challenge, and emerged with integrity and skill. The recognition she received from the millionaire and others was meaningful, but it was secondary to the internal understanding she had gained. She felt a quiet strength that had nothing to do with wealth, status, or approval, and everything to do with dedication, courage, and authenticity. The days and weeks that followed were filled with small victories. Invitations to perform continued to arrive, each one a chance to explore her abilities and share her music. She encountered people who were moved by her playing, who sought her insight and guidance, and who respected the dedication that had brought her to this point. She remained humble, aware that talent alone was not enough to sustain success, but confident that honesty, effort, and persistence would carry her further than she had ever imagined. The millionaire's respect deepened as well. He no longer saw her merely as someone to challenge, but as a person of skill, integrity, and depth. Their interactions became collaborative in a way that had not been possible before. He listened, asked questions, and occasionally offered advice, not as judgment, but as engagement. In witnessing her growth, he discovered lessons about humility, patience, and the transformative power of dedication. She understood that the challenge had been a turning point, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She had learned to trust her instincts, embrace her abilities, and confront fear with courage. The experience had reshaped her life in ways that extended far beyond the performance itself. She had discovered a resilience and strength that had lain dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Her life continued to change gradually but unmistakably. The recognition she had received opened doors, but she approached each opportunity with care, remaining true to the honesty and dedication that had carried her through the challenge. She began to see a future in which her music could touch more lives, not through spectacle or flash, but through sincerity, effort, and connection. In this new chapter, she realized that transformation was not instantaneous. It came in moments of preparation, reflection, and engagement. It came in the quiet victories of practice, in the courage to step into a room full of strangers, and in the willingness to let her talent speak for itself. The challenge had been the catalyst, but the change had been built slowly, brick by brick, through perseverance and honesty. And so, as she looked back on the night of the performance and the days that followed, she understood that her journey was just beginning. The impact of that one evening extended far beyond the applause. It had reshaped her life, altered perceptions, and opened paths she had never imagined. The millionaire, the audience, and even she herself had been transformed by the music she had played, and the lessons learned from facing doubt, pressure, and expectation would guide her for years to come. She realized that success was not only measured by recognition, but by the courage to embrace one's own potential and the determination to act on it. Her music had become a testament to that truth, a voice that could convey honesty, resilience, and beauty. The world had noticed, and she had noticed herself, and that combination of acknowledgement and self-awareness created a quiet, profound power that would continue to shape her path forward. Life had changed quietly, almost imperceptibly at first after that night. The echoes of the piano, the weight of the applause, and the gaze of the millionaire stayed with her, shaping each day in subtle ways. She woke up with a sense of possibility she had never known, as if the world had expanded overnight while she had been sleeping. The routines she had once accepted without thought now felt different. Carrying trays at work, walking through the quiet streets, preparing simple meals. All these ordinary acts were now touched by the awareness that she had faced something extraordinary and survived. She understood that life had offered her a door, and stepping through it required more than talent. It required courage, honesty, and persistence. Opportunities came in forms both small and significant. Invitations to perform continued, some for intimate gatherings, others in larger venues where strangers would sit quietly and listen, waiting to be moved. Every performance carried the same weight, the same responsibility to be truthful in her music. She had learned that the sound of the piano was more than notes. It was a voice, an extension of herself that could speak in ways words could not. With each note, she told the story of her struggle, her patience, and her resilience. She found herself growing in confidence, not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that allowed her to step forward with quiet authority and clarity. The millionaire remained a part of her world, but their relationship had changed. He no longer issued challenges or expressed doubt. Instead, he asked questions, listened, and sometimes offered guidance in subtle ways. Their interactions were no longer tests but exchanges, conversations in which respect and mutual recognition replaced judgment and expectation. Through him, she realized that even people with power and wealth carried their own doubts, their own fears, and that recognition of talent could inspire change in unexpected ways. Their connection was not friendship in the casual sense, but a bridge built on mutual respect, forged through the honesty of her music and the courage she had shown. She discovered that transformation did not arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, day by day, in the choices she made and the moments she embraced. She practiced diligently, not because someone demanded it, but because the music had become part of her identity. It was a discipline that grounded her, a way to stay connected to the truth of her own life. She experimented with new pieces, explored different expressions, and allowed herself to take risks she would never have dared before. Each experiment brought discovery and growth, a reminder that mastery was a journey, not a destination. Alongside the growth in her music came a deepening awareness of the impact she could have on others. People began to approach her for advice, encouragement, or simply to share their own stories of struggle and perseverance. She listened patiently, offering support in quiet ways that felt natural. She realized that her journey was not only about personal achievement but also about connection, about demonstrating that courage, effort, and honesty could create change beyond oneself. She had faced the gaze of doubt and emerged transformed, and that example became something tangible for others to witness and learn from. Her confidence extended beyond the piano. She noticed herself carrying herself differently in everyday life. Conversations were no longer met with hesitation. She spoke with clarity and intention. She met people's eyes with steady calm, no longer shrinking from attention. Simple actions, a smile to a neighbor, a greeting to a colleague, the way she handled daily tasks, were infused with a quiet authority born from experience. It was not arrogance, but presence, the result of having faced fear, embraced responsibility, and discovered her own capabilities. The impact of her performance continued to ripple outward. People who had witnessed her playing that night shared their memories, not as gossip, but as genuine appreciation for the honesty and depth they had experienced. Stories circulated about the quiet woman who had played with extraordinary skill and emotion, capturing hearts without ostentation. She understood that the recognition she received was not about fame or material reward, but about acknowledgement of authenticity. People were drawn to her music because it spoke to something real inside them, something they recognized but often forgot to honor in themselves. The challenge she had faced, once a source of fear, became a lens through which she understood the value of courage. She learned that challenges were not merely obstacles but opportunities to reveal strength, skill, and character. The encounter with the millionaire had been the catalyst, but the growth that followed was her own work. Each note she played, each rehearsal, each moment of self-reflection built a foundation that could not be shaken by doubt, criticism, or uncertainty. She had learned to trust herself, to honor her abilities, and to act with integrity even when the outcome was unknown. Her life continued to shift, subtly but unmistakably. Invitations to perform became more frequent, and she began to take opportunities that pushed her beyond her comfort zone. Small venues grew into larger ones, intimate audiences became broader crowds, and each time she played, she refined her craft, deepened her expression, and strengthened her connection to the music and to herself. Yet she remained grounded, remembering the quiet room where she had practiced for years, the nights when her music had been heard by no one, and the courage it had taken to step forward for the first time. These memories kept her humble, patient, and focused on what mattered most: honesty in her music and authenticity in her life. The millionaire continued to observe, often quietly, always with respect. Their conversations evolved into discussions about art, technique, and the emotional resonance of music. She learned from his insights not because he commanded knowledge, but because he had experienced the world in ways that offered perspective. In turn, he learned from her courage and dedication, recognizing that wealth and influence could not substitute for honesty, effort, or skill. Their relationship became an unusual partnership, rooted in mutual recognition, understanding, and the transformative power of talent met with opportunity. Through all of this, she discovered the joy of giving back. She began to mentor others quietly, offering guidance to those who shared her love of music but lacked confidence, resources, or encouragement. She understood the importance of nurturing talent, not for recognition, but because it was a responsibility and a privilege to help others realize what they were capable of. Each person she guided reminded her of her own journey and strengthened her belief that courage and dedication could shape lives beyond her own. Despite the changes in her life, she never lost sight of the essence of her music. Each performance was an opportunity to connect, to speak, and to express the depth of human experience. She did not play for praise or approval but for the truth that resided in each note, the honesty she had cultivated through years of preparation, and the resilience she had discovered in herself. Music remained her anchor, her constant companion, and the most direct expression of her identity. It was through the piano that she could convey everything that words could not, reaching hearts in ways that were immediate, intimate, and profound. The transformation extended to how she viewed the world. She learned that recognition, respect, and opportunity were not gifts freely given, but earned through persistence, authenticity, and courage. She saw how her own life had shifted because she had faced a challenge with honesty and preparation, and she understood that others could do the same. The experience taught her patience, resilience, and the subtle power of quiet determination. She recognized that the world could be harsh and dismissive, but it could also be open, responsive, and transformative when met with skill, integrity, and courage. Over time, she began to envision the long-term impact of her journey. She considered performances in different cities, collaborations with other musicians, and even teaching opportunities that would allow her to inspire a new generation of performers. Each idea carried risk, doubt, and effort, but also possibility, hope, and growth. She approached each decision with the same care and attention she had applied to her music. Deliberate, thoughtful, and rooted in authenticity. She realized that her life had expanded far beyond what she had imagined, not because the world had changed, but because she had stepped into her own power. Her relationship with the Millionaire remained a quiet testament to the power of respect and recognition. They continued to meet, exchange ideas, and reflect on their experiences, but without expectation or pressure. He admired her courage, dedication, and skill, and she valued his insights, perspective, and respect. Their connection was a reminder that relationships built on mutual recognition could transcend hierarchy, wealth, and power, and that influence could be wielded with humility and grace. She understood that the night of the challenge had been only the beginning. What followed, the preparation, the perseverance, the courage to face doubt and expectation, had shaped her far more than any single performance. She had discovered a resilience, strength, and authenticity that would remain with her for the rest of her life. Music had been the catalyst, but the transformation was personal, earned through effort, patience, and courage. As she looked back on the journey, she realized that the impact of that one night was not measured by applause, recognition, or opportunity alone. It was measured by the person she had become, confident, honest, resilient, and capable of facing challenges with integrity. She had learned to trust herself, to honor her abilities, and to act with courage even when the outcome was uncertain. Her life had shifted from one of quiet survival to one of active engagement, and the lessons she had learned would guide her in every step forward. Her days became filled with music, work, reflection, and connection. Each performance was an opportunity to reaffirm the truth she had discovered, that courage, effort, and authenticity could create real, lasting impact. Each conversation, each gesture, and each decision was informed by the knowledge that talent alone was not enough. It required persistence, honesty, and the willingness to step forward even in the face of fear. She had faced a challenge meant to test her and had emerged transformed, ready to shape her future in ways she had once only dreamed of. The story of her performance spread slowly but steadily. People recounted the night not as a spectacle, but as a testament to what one person could achieve when skill, honesty, and courage converged. She became a quiet inspiration, not for fame or fortune, but for the power of perseverance, the importance of preparation, and the impact of authenticity. Those who encountered her music carried it with them, influenced by the depth and honesty of her playing, and in turn, they shared it with others. Ultimately, she understood that life had offered her more than recognition. It had offered transformation. The challenge, the preparation, the performance, and the aftermath had taught her that true success was rooted in authenticity, courage, and the consistent effort to honor one's own abilities. Music had given her a voice, the courage had given her freedom, and the recognition had provided opportunity. Together, these elements shaped a life that was richer, fuller, and more meaningful than she had ever imagined. And so, she moved forward, carrying the lessons of the past and the promise of the future. Each note she played, each step she took, and each opportunity she embraced became part of a life transformed by honesty, perseverance, and courage. The challenge had been met. The music had spoken, and her journey, once quiet and unseen, had become a story of empowerment, inspiration, and the enduring power of one person willing to trust themselves and step into the light.